I want to start with Donald Trump's tariffs, what he said in his joint address last night, just a little more than 24 hours ago.
Tariffs, it's a beautiful word, isn't it? That, along with our other policies, will allow our auto industry to absolutely boom. It's going to boom. Spoke to the majors today, all three, the top people, and they're so excited.
So excited. Tariffs are going to help the auto industry so much. He knew it wasn't true then. We had already heard from Ford CEO saying it was going to blow a hole in the industry. And here we are, 24 later, exemption time.
I mean, I will say it took longer this time to walk back the tariffs than it did last time. I mean, if you remember, like just a month ago, people are having a hard time keeping track. Early February, he said on like a Saturday he was going to put them in place on Tuesday, and then by Monday mid-morning they were called off. During his first term, he had threatened to put tariffs on Mexico. Then a few weeks before those were supposed to go into effect, he called them off. I mean, if you're starting to see a pattern, so am I, about how these tariffs work. But I mean, the one thing that does remain consistent is this administration continues to talk about tariffs in one form or another. They have been very consistent so far with the tariffs on China, but those ones did actually go in place, a 10% tariff a month ago. Just the other day, they added to that. So those tariffs are now 20%. So it's not insignificant. And even this latest walk back with the auto industry, yes, that's a big lifesaver, at least for the next month, for the auto industry and all the industries that are dependent on that, like the suppliers in Michigan and Ohio. But that doesn't do anything for appliances, electronics coming from Mexico, produce, avocados, berries, tomatoes, not to mention tequila, beer, and then energy products, for example, coming in from Canada. So even though there's a bit of a reprieve here, the effects are still going to be really widely felt across the economy.
Okay, but let's just stay with the auto industry, because the press secretary said during this month, what these automakers can do is sort of re-rack their manufacturing so they can start shifting things that happen in Canada and Mexico to the United States. Like, let's get real. There are not empty factories owned by Ford and GM ready to produce certain parts with auto workers ready to do it. Like, this isn't even possible. What are they talking about?
Well, I talked to a former industry analyst and someone who had worked in the industry as a sort of a buyer on the manufacturing side, and I was asking him about that. I was saying, well, can you just throw a second or third shift on the Silverado plant in the U.S. and start making them there instead of Canada? And he said, no, it's not that easy. Each plant is specifically tailored to make a very specific vehicle. If you want to change that, you need new equipment, you need to reconfigure the plant, you need additional workers, you need to find those workers, you need to train them, you need to, not to mention, pay them higher wages and health care than you do in Canada or Mexico, which is an added cost for companies. Despite the White House acting like this is something the companies can shift over in a few months, the auto industry plans out in years, like 4 years, 10 years, for where their production is going to be, what that's going to look like. And so if they're going to do this, not only is it going to take time, but it's also going to take a lot of money, a big investment. And these companies already operate on relatively thin margins. They're not starving here, but they are on a bit of a tight margin. Prices are very important to consumers, so they're very sensitive to price, any increase. So making that big investment is going to add to higher costs ultimately for consumers.
David, we understand the idea behind why they would want to impose tariffs on something like China. But let's go back to Canada and Mexico, because Howard Lutnick said, listen, the president just needs them to meet in the middle. But the president again today said Canada's efforts on fentanyl were just not good enough. Let's level set. There is not a massive amount of fentanyl coming from Canada to the United States. What is this?
And what's going to be good enough? And Donald Trump doesn't care about the proliferation of drugs, because he just pardoned the Silk Road founder and operator. So this is not about drugs. And I think we have to just recognize Donald Trump has no idea what he's doing. None whatsoever when it comes to tariffs. And poor Howard Lutnick, bless his heart, has his head on a swivel every time he steps in front of the media because he doesn't know what he's defending. And I think what we saw last night at the State of the Union was Donald Trump saying, with all of his showmanship, tariffs are great. They make America great. They give us a strong economy. Well, if tariffs are great, then why are we providing exemptions for them? Think about it. I mean, if truly his economic theory is tariffs make America great, then why are we coming up with exemptions and changing our mind all the time? And it's because he doesn't actually know what he's doing. We've had this conversation before. Everyone knows this. If you want to reposition the domestic economy into a certain sector, tariffs can be a tool of that, one tool of a broader package. And in fact, you don't do the tariffs by presidential declaration. You typically would do it through a massive legislative package that recognizes we want to turn the U.S. economy in a certain direction.
But David,
that
we're
is
not even a manufacturing-based economy anymore. Decades and decades ago, right? 50% of our economy was manufacturing. It's less than 10% now, and that's not going to change. We're a service-based economy.
Which exposes Donald Trump's ignorance, right? We started this pivot from manufacturing to service in the 90s because arguably we were getting outcompeted in manufacturing anyway. It was a massive pivot with significant job losses, hurt to industry, hurt to employees, but we did it. We got to cheap goods and decided a service-based economy is going to grow the American economy. Donald Trump thinks perhaps manufacturing will do it, but he thinks a declaration of a tariff is going to reignite the auto industry in the country, and it's not going to do it. And he cannot do this in a way that the likes of our own Secretary of Commerce know how to justify. And there is an absurdity to this. But look, he is going to break this economy with the direction he's going currently. And the only chance Donald Trump and Republicans have for a political fortune in the next 2 years is a white-hot economy. He's making sure we don't have one.
Jessica, last night he said this is great for farmers. He said farmers have fun with this idea they'd have less competition. Yes, they'd have less international competition, but we produce more food in the United States than we can consume. We need to export. And now CNBC is reporting they're now weighing agricultural exemptions. Was this thing always about exemptions? Because this is the one tool Donald Trump has where he can actually choose winners and losers. And when you come to him and say, I'm going to need that exemption, sir, he can decide if you get it.
Exactly. It gives him absolute power, where people who have access to him, who somehow pay for access to him or are connected to members who are close to him, get what they're asking for. It's based on the whim of Donald Trump. And there are few reporters who understand as well as you, Stephanie, that there's something that business likes, which is consistency, predictability from government. This abolishes that. It's bad for consumers. It's bad for farmers. It's bad for business. It kind of reflects the fact that Donald Trump somehow is stuck in the 80s when there was a manufacturing economy, when, Sylvester Stallone was a hero in American cinema.
Okay, let's be clear. The 80s are his favorite decade. Right? Stretch limos. That's his jam.
And
he's kept the haircut.
Yes.
It's actually the 1880s. Let's be clear. He's quoting William McKinley.
No, that's just his policy on race.
Yes.
I don't think he knew what
But
that
is
was.
there any chance? Let's open our hearts and minds. Any chance it works? Any chance this is short-term pain, this is negotiating? Because let's be clear, we do have a stronger hand than Canada or Mexico.
Well, it's not going to work. I was in Mexico last week. I met one day with 8 CEOs from various industries. CEOs, and half of them were CEOs of U.S. companies. I think about a third of the exports from Mexico to the U.S. come from companies that are U.S. owned. You look at a company like Walmart, 80% of the products that fill its shelves come from Mexico. And all of these gentlemen were completely dumbfounded as to why Trump was pursuing this, because they don't see it as a trading relationship. It actually isn't a trading relationship like we have with China. It is this deeply intertwined production partnership. And it's up and down the supply chain on automobiles. It's in electronics, agriculture. You can just go on down the line. And Trump is simply shooting the U.S. economy in the foot for the sake of performance. And what he's trying to perform is he's trying to deliver on a campaign promise that he's on the side of the American worker, who is part of this odd coalition of voters he's put together. And the people who are most fervently in his corner among working class voters are displaced manufacturing workers or rural voters, all of who have been deeply brutalized by this shift into a service and a technology economy from a manufacturing economy.
But that's not going to mean a manufacturing plant is going to open up in Sandusky, Ohio
But what he needs
tomorrow.
to do is show to them he's trying to do that. And on his way to performing this act of rescuing those people, he is unwinding economic partnerships that are vital to the American economy. And part of this for him is the pain is the point. He's not, he isn't that concerned ultimately about the outcome. He wants Canada to kiss the ring. He wants Mexico to kiss the ring. He's not going to get affected personally by the China breaking. And then when you get Howard Lutnick, I have a little different view of the bless Howard Lutnick's heart, because I actually think he's an accomplice in this. He was on, I think, Bloomberg Radio.
I was being gracious.
Okay. He was on the radio this morning, ticking off these great deals that are happening now. TSMC, the Taiwanese chip makers, is putting in a $100 billion plant. Apple's putting in a plant, and he went through this list and he said, you now have over $1 trillion in investment, but meanwhile, while that is happening, they're sabotaging existing trade relationships that are worth way more than that.